Snow drifted slowly past the tall windows of our mansion, covering the garden in a quiet white blanket. Inside, everything looked like a perfect Christmas postcard. The tree in the living room was decorated with golden lights, crystal ornaments, and ribbons that shimmered whenever the fire from the fireplace flickered. But something felt wrong. The house was too quiet. No Christmas music, no laughter, no smell of dinner cooking in the kitchen. I stood near the staircase, watching my parents whisper to each other in the hallway. Their voices were low, serious nothing, like the warm conversations families usually had on Christmas Eve. "Daniel," my mother suddenly called. Her voice was sharp and impatient. I walked toward them slowly. My eyes dropped to the floor beside the front door. A single suitcase stood there. My suitcase, it was already packed. A strange knot tightened in my stomach. "What's going on?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. My father adjusted his expensive watch and finally looked at me. His face was calm, almost bored, like this was just another business meeting. "You're leaving tonight," he said. For a moment, I thought I had heard him wrong. "Leaving," I repeated. "Leaving where?" My mother crossed her arms. "Overseas." My mind went blank. "What do you mean, overseas?" She picked up an envelope from the table and handed it to me like it was nothing important. Inside was a plane ticket, one way, departure time 11:45 p.m. tonight. I stared at the ticket, my heart starting to pound. "This has to be a joke," I said quietly. "It's not." My father replied, "You're 18 now. It's time you learn independence." Independence? The word sounded strange in the cold silence of the hallway. "You're sending me away on Christmas Eve?" I asked. Neither of them answered right away. My older brother, Victor, appeared at the top of the staircase. He leaned against the railing, watching the scene like it was entertainment. Victor had always been the perfect son. Top grades, prestigious university, already working with my father in the family company. Compared to him, I was invisible. "You've always been too soft, Daniel," my father continued. "Books, drawing, daydreaming, none of it prepares you for the real world." My mother nodded. "This trip will build your character." The words stung more than I expected. "So you're just sending me away?" I asked. "You'll thank us later," she said. I looked down at the suitcase again. It felt like the ground beneath me had shifted. "What about Christmas?" I asked quietly. Victor laughed from the staircase. "Oh, come on," he said. "It's not like you contribute anything around here anyway." His words echoed in my chest. For years I had tried to make them proud, but nothing I did was ever enough. Finally, my father checked his watch again. "The driver is waiting," he said. "Your flight leaves in 3 hours." 3 hours? That was all the time I had left in the only home I had ever known. No goodbye dinner, no family hug, just a suitcase and a one-way ticket. My mother opened the front door. "Cold winter air rushed inside. Don't miss your flight," she said. I picked up the suitcase slowly. It felt heavier than it should have. Maybe because it carried more than clothes, it carried the truth. I stepped outside into the falling snow. The black car waited at the gate, engine running. Behind me, the door closed with a quiet click. Just like that, my life in that house ended. The drive to the airport felt unreal. Christmas lights glowed along the streets while families walked together, laughing and carrying shopping bags. Everyone seemed warm, everyone except me. When the car stopped at the airport entrance, the driver opened the trunk silently. I stepped out, holding the handle of my suitcase. Snowflakes landed on my jacket. For a long moment, I just stood there, staring at the bright airport doors. No one from my family had come with me, not even to say goodbye. I realized something then. This wasn't a lesson. It wasn't about independence. It was abandonment. I walked inside the airport alone. The giant Christmas tree in the terminal sparkled with lights while cheerful music played over the speakers. But none of it felt real. I sat down near the departure gate and looked at my ticket again. A one-way flight. One suitcase, no family. As snow fell outside the glass windows, something deep inside me slowly changed. The pain was still there, the betrayal too, but beneath it, something new began to grow. A quiet promise. One day I would return. And when I did, I would no longer be the son they threw away on Christmas Eve. The moment the plane landed, reality hit me harder than the cold winter air outside the airport. I was alone, completely alone. The airport announcements were in a language that sounded unfamiliar, fast, and confusing. People hurried past me with families, luggage, and warm greetings, while I stood there holding my single suitcase like a lost traveler with nowhere to go. I checked my wallet again. $2,000. That was everything my parents had given me to start a new life. At the time, it sounded like a lot, but after paying for a small, cheap hostel room for the first week, I realized how quickly money could disappear. The hostel room was barely bigger than a closet. The mattress was thin, the window cracked, and the heater worked only when it felt like it. But it was the only place I could afford. Every night I lay awake staring at the ceiling, thinking about home. About the warm fireplace, about Christmas lights, about how quickly my family had erased me from their lives. The first job I found was at a small restaurant washing dishes. The manager didn't ask many questions. He only looked at my passport and said, "Can you start tonight?" I nodded immediately. That night my hands stayed in hot, soapy water for 6 straight hours. Plates piled up faster than I could wash them. The kitchen was loud, hot, and filled with shouting cooks. By the end of the shift, my fingers were red and wrinkled, and my back felt like it might break. But when the manager handed me my first small paycheck, I realized something important. This money was mine. No parents, no expectations, no comparisons to Victor, just me. Still, survival wasn't easy. During the day, I searched for better opportunities. At night, I washed dishes until midnight. Some evenings after work, I rode an old bicycle delivering food for extra cash. The winter wind felt like knives cutting through my jacket as I pedaled through dark streets. Sometimes I asked myself the same question over and over. Why did they send me away? Was I really that much of a disappointment? Those thoughts haunted me during the first year. But slowly, something inside me began to change. Instead of wasting time on anger, I started focusing on learning. After my shifts ended, I would sit in my tiny room with a second-hand laptop I bought from a pawn shop. That laptop became my teacher. I watched online courses about programming, read articles about business, studied successful companies and entrepreneurs. Most nights I slept only 4 hours, but every day I learned something new. Months turned into years. The boy who arrived at the airport with confusion slowly began turning into someone else. Someone stronger, someone determined. Eventually, my programming skills became good enough to start taking small freelance jobs online. The first time someone paid me $50 to fix their website, I stared at the screen in disbelief. $50 for something I created. That night I didn't sleep at all, not because I was tired, because I was excited. The freelance work slowly grew. Small projects turned into bigger ones. Soon I had enough clients that I could finally quit the restaurant job. For the first time in years, I felt something close to freedom. I moved out of the hostel and rented a tiny apartment. It wasn't fancy. The furniture was old and the walls were thin, but it was mine. Sometimes, late at night, I still thought about my parents. About Christmas Eve, about the suitcase. At first, those memories filled me with pain, but eventually they became fuel. Every hour I worked, every skill I learned, every success I achieved, it all came from one silent promise I made to myself at the airport. One day, I would build a life so strong that no one could ever throw me away again. And somewhere deep inside my heart, another thought quietly waited. One day, my parents would see what they had lost. They had sent me away believing I would fail, but they had made one very big mistake. They had underestimated the quiet son they abandoned with one suitcase. 10 years can change a person in ways no one expects. At 28, my life looked nothing like the night my parents sent me away with a single suitcase. The small freelance projects I once celebrated had slowly grown into something far bigger than I ever imagined. What started as late night coding in a tiny apartment eventually became my own tech company. At first, it was just me and 2 friends working from a cramped office with second-hand desks and cheap coffee. We worked 16-hour days, surviving on determination and stubborn belief. Most startups fail. Everyone reminded us of that. Investors rejected us, banks ignored us, but we kept building. One breakthrough product changed everything. Within a year, our software platform began spreading across companies in different countries. Businesses loved how simple and powerful it was. Clients multiplied, investors who once rejected us suddenly wanted meetings. The small office became a larger office. Then a headquarters. By the time I turned 28, our company was valued in the hundreds of millions. Magazines called me a self-made entrepreneur. Interviews asked about my inspiring success story, but none of them knew the real beginning of that story. It started on Christmas Eve with abandonment. One quiet afternoon, while I was reviewing financial reports in my office, overlooking the city skyline, my assistant knocked on the door. "Daniel, your lawyer is here," she said. That was unusual. I rarely met my lawyer in person unless something serious was happening. When he walked in, he carried a thick folder and wore an expression I couldn't quite read. "Daniel," he said, sitting across from me, "I've been reviewing some old legal records connected to your family." My family? I hadn't heard that word in years. I leaned back in my chair. "Why?" He slid the folder across the desk. "Because something important was hidden from you." Inside were legal documents, signatures, and official seals. The name that caught my attention immediately was my grandfather's. My chest tightened slightly. He had been the only person in my childhood who treated me with kindness. He used to sit with me in the garden and tell stories about building the family business from nothing. He believed in hard work more than status, and unlike my parents, he never treated me like a disappointment. "What is this?" I asked quietly. My lawyer folded his hands. "Your grandfather created a trust fund before he passed away." "A trust fund?" I frowned. "Yes, a very large one." I turned the pages slowly, trying to process the numbers printed on the documents. The inheritance was massive, life-changing even for someone already successful. But what shocked me even more was the name listed as the sole beneficiary. Mine, not my parents, not Victor, just me. My heart started beating faster. "Why am I only hearing about this now?" I asked. My lawyer hesitated for a moment before answering. "Because someone tried to keep it hidden." The room suddenly felt very quiet. "Your parents were aware of this trust," he continued, "but they delayed informing you about it after your grandfather's death." A cold realization spread through my mind. "They knew," I asked. "Yes." Memories from 10 years ago began replaying in my head. The sudden decision. The one-way ticket, the rushed goodbye, the suitcase waiting by the door. They didn't send me away to build character. They sent me away so I wouldn't discover the inheritance. For a moment, anger burned in my chest stronger than anything I had felt in years. But before I could even decide what to do with this information, my lawyer added something unexpected. "There's more." I looked up. "Your parents' company, it's collapsing." "What do you mean?" "Debt, failed investments, lawsuits. Their financial situation is extremely unstable." The irony was almost unbelievable. The same people who once controlled a powerful business empire were now struggling to survive. My lawyer slid another document across the table. "They've recently learned about your success," he said carefully. A strange feeling settled in my stomach, and he sighed quietly. "They've requested a meeting with you." I stared out the window at the massive city below. 10 years ago, they abandoned me without a second thought. Now they wanted to see me again, but deep down, I already knew the real reason. They didn't want their son back. They wanted the inheritance. The meeting was scheduled at a luxury hotel in the city where I grew up. The same city I had left behind 10 years ago, with a single suitcase and a broken heart. Walking through the airport again felt strange, like stepping into a memory that belonged to someone else. The place looked almost the same, but I was no longer the frightened 18-year-old who had stood here alone on Christmas Eve. This time, I arrived as the CEO of a global tech company. Success had changed many things in my life, but it had not erased the past. A black car picked me up from the airport and drove me toward the hotel. As the city skyline appeared in the distance, old memories surfaced one by one. The mansion, the cold hallway. The suitcase waiting by the door. By the time the car stopped at the hotel entrance, I felt calm again. Not angry, not nervous, just calm. The meeting room was on the top floor. When I entered, I saw them sitting at a long table. My parents' 10 years had changed them more than I expected. My father's hair had turned mostly gray, and the confident posture he once carried was gone. My mother looked thinner, her eyes tired and restless. For a moment, none of us spoke. Then my mother forced a small smile. "Daniel," she said softly. Hearing my name from her voice after so many years felt strange. "It's been a long time." I sat down across from them. "Yes," I replied calmly, 10 years. My father cleared his throat and tried to sound professional. "We've been following your success," he said. "You've done very well." The compliment sounded awkward, almost unnatural. They had never praised me before, not when I was a child, not when I was trying to prove myself. Now suddenly they were proud. I knew why. My mother leaned forward slightly. "We always believed you would succeed," she said quickly. I almost laughed, but instead, I simply asked the question that mattered. "So why did you ask to meet me?" They exchanged a brief glance. Then my father finally spoke the truth. "Our company is facing some financial difficulties." I stayed silent. "We made some investments that didn't go as planned," he continued, "and now we're dealing with significant debt." There it was. The real reason. My mother quickly added, "But this is something the family can solve together." Family. Another word they hadn't used in a long time. My father opened a folder and slid it across the table. Inside were documents about my grandfather's trust fund. "We know about the inheritance," he said. "Of course they did. And as you know," he continued, "your grandfather built that fortune for the family." I looked directly into his eyes. "No," I said quietly. "He built it through his own hard work." My father's expression tightened. "The inheritance should be used to help all of us," he insisted. I leaned back in my chair. Memories flashed in my mind again. The airport, the snow, the silence. "You sent me away with one suitcase," I said calmly. Neither of them responded. "It was Christmas Eve." I continued. "You didn't even come to the airport." My mother's eyes lowered to the table. My father's voice grew impatient. "That was 10 years ago. It's time to move forward." I slowly pushed the folder back toward them. "I already have." They looked confused. "What do you mean?" My mother asked. "I mean the inheritance no longer belongs to you." My father frowned. "It belongs to me," I corrected. The room fell silent. Then I added the final piece, "and most of it is already gone." Both of them stared at me in shock. "Gone," my father repeated. "Yes," I said calmly. "I donated it." My mother's face went pale. "Donated to who?" I stood up from my chair. "To scholarships," I answered, "for students who were abandoned by their families." Neither of them spoke. I walked toward the door, feeling lighter with every step. Just before leaving, I turned back one last time. "You once said sending me away would build my character," I said. I gave a small smile. "You were right." Then I walked out of the room, leaving them behind with the consequences of the choice they made 10 years ago. The same choice that created the success they could never take back.